Hello, my friends. It is Tuesday, December 10th, and these are four big stories. Putin's pain has just begun with what's going on in Syria, and it's far, far worse than what you might have imagined. So losing Syria as a base has hurt, but it's far more than that, and we'll explain in just a little bit. In the meantime, I thought this would be a great way to start. The Kremlin had called Assad's decision to leave the post of Syrian president a personal decision. Like, yeah, he's just spending time with his family. Assad's resignation from the process of acting as head of state is a personal decision. The rest, no comment. Peskov said, yeah, he's just chilling at the pool with his family in Moscow. I don't think that that's what's going on. Okay, the Russians have deployed ships and military transport aircraft to load the remnants of troops, weapons, and equipment in return from Russia from Syria, according to the main intelligence directorate of Ukraine. They're getting out of Dodge with what they can, and they don't know if they're going to be able to retain leases on the bases or if the new regime is going to completely push them out. So they're salvaging what they can salvage in the meantime. Now, Assad has fallen. The repercussions for Russia's regional clout will likely be manifold and profound. Again, the pain for Putin has just begun. Even if it manages to keep its bases in Syria, which I don't know that it will. This is a mock-up of the British intelligence update from a NATO member. The United Kingdom's Ministry of Defense has reviewed the current state of the Russian military. Ha 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 ha. Okay, yeah. So as far as it goes in Syria, this is the reality. Now, this is the article from here where this Hannah Noti, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. She has a PhD from Oxford, and she was writing about what was going on in Syria. This article was in the New York Times. And here we are. In 2013, Mr. Putin had emerged as Mr. Assad's knight in shining armor. That's right, he did, and he was propping him up, and incidentally exposed the weakness of President Barack Obama's red line in Syria. Just a little bit more. Russia telegraphed its growing concern and intensified bombardments in the rebel-held northwest province of Idlib, but it did nothing to reinforce its presence in Syria. As the rebels advanced, it became obvious that Russia would not intervene in any major way. With Russia's military capacity consumed in Ukraine, its calculus had changed. Mr. Putin probably realized that it was time to cut Mr. al-Assad loose and prioritize retaining Russia's military bases in a new Syria. So, yeah, I mean, that's the reality, the new reality on the ground, so they say. Okay, but that happened because he couldn't do it because he was too overextended in Ukraine. The weakness and stupidity of the Biden administration, once again, it's hard to believe, but it seems like the Biden administration is pushing to allow Putin to keep his bases in Syria, the ones necessary to continue taking over Africa. Now, I think that's an overstatement by Jay in Kyiv about the State Department, says Blinken, and today was discussing the latest developments in Syria, including peaceful transition of power through an inclusive Syrian-led process. I think that's a bit of an overstatement, but look at this. This is Jason J. Smart. Quote, Assad refused a deal with the U.S. before his overthrow. Before the Syrian opposition offensive, the Americans offered Assad sanctions reductions if he expelled Hezbollah. Okay, but he wasn't willing to expel Hezbollah. Jake Sullivan wanted to, but failed to save Assad. Like, that's the same Jake Sullivan that's doing what he's doing to Ukraine by slow-walking aid. Okay. So I showed you that on the way out, the Russians and the Syrian army were bombing hospitals. I showed you this just 2 days ago. Okay, an analysis of attacks on Syria's medical infrastructure by Physicians for Human Rights. Total attacks on medical facilities, 604. By Syrian government forces, 312. By Syrian government or Russian forces, 232. By anti-government forces, 24, unknown 21, Islamic State 10. Like, it's all Syria and Russia bombing hospitals. Like, how about that? Okay, the largest statue of Hafez Assad, that is Assad, the Bashar al-Assad's father. The country has been destroyed. Assad's dictatorship lasts for 53 years, from 1971, ruled first by Hafez and then his son Bashar. And so here we see the statue coming down. And there we go. Okay. So, yeah, and they're very happy about that. Now, Ian Bremmer 2 days ago said Assad will not fall. Ian Bremmer today. Let me explain some things, but it's not. I'm not trying to poke Ian Bremmer in the eye. What I want to show you is this. He posted this. As weak as Syrian President Bashar al-Assad is now, the new blitz by rebel forces is unlikely to topple his regime. But what he said is next is really important. He is too important an ally for Iran and Russia to lose. That's why he said it wasn't going to happen, but it did happen. And so Iran and Russia lost a very important ally. And there are some reasons that is important, but I'll get to that in just a moment. Israel's primary objective is to destroy the remaining military potential of the Syrian army. Okay, military bases, aircraft, missile systems, production facilities, and missile depots were targeted. The Times of Israel sources reports that Israeli air forces struck at least 3 major air bases in Syria, where dozens of planes and helicopters were stationed. A little bit more here. Israeli fighter jets attacked over 250 military targets, including Syrian military aircraft systems. It sounds like the same thing, but that was today. After yesterday, Arab media reported Israeli strikes on several areas in Damascus and 150 Syrian military sites in the previous evening. So 150 the day before yesterday and then 250 yesterday. They're really reducing Syria's military capacity in a big way. So in my video the other day called The New Realities on the Ground, I ended it by talking about Saddam Hussein. As a dictator, he's like, hey, how dare you do this thing to me, when he's talking to the judge who's sentencing him. Like he's like drunk on his own dictatorness. And Anna from Ukraine was talking about the same thing. Dictators, 3 stages. 1, democratic elections, or so it seems. 2, silence dissent, agree or else. And then 3, there's a terminal stage. He thinks he's unstoppable. And Putin hit a terminal stage and didn't see Syria slipping away. Let's hear what she has to say here.
Hello guys. You know, literally every dictator goes through different stages in his regime. It may start with the democratic elections, develop into a stage where people around that dictator persuade him he's always right because otherwise you get killed or imprisoned, until finally the dictator reaches the terminal stage when he is convinced he controls everything, knows everything, and even predicts everything. Putin is exactly on this terminal stage, and that is why he did not notice how Russia committed the greatest geopolitical suicide when lost control over Syria. And here I don't mean a couple of military bases, but new opportunities for new oil and gas pipelines on the territory of Syria, bringing Qatar gas, oil from Iraq, and Syria to Europe for cheaper prices without Russia.
Okay, so did you hear that? Okay, but first, there's this terminal dictator stage where you just can't see what they can't see. But yeah, cheap oil and gas from Qatar. Jake Bro talked about the same thing. Now that Assad and the Russians are out of Syria, the Persian Gulf states might actually be able to make this Qatar-Turkey pipeline happen. This would help Europe reduce dependency on Russian energy imports. And this is what I'm talking about. The pain is just going to keep coming. And it would eliminate Iran's perpetual threat against ships near the Strait of Hormuz. Because if they can pump this gas from down here in Qatar or Saudi through Syria, through Turkey, into Europe, man, that's going to be a game changer. And I think it's coming. So Putin's pain is just increasing. And remember, it's painful because he's kind of a mobster. I mean, that's the way that he functions. Latest reminder that it's always about money and holding on to the power needed to gain it and secure it. Modern dictators like Putin aren't ideologues. They're mafia bosses with a Swiss bank account to fill. Yep. That's exactly right. Okay, let's turn our attention to big story number 2. Zelensky announces successful test of new Ukrainian missile. Successful tests of new Ukrainian missile dubbed the Ruta or Ru are underway. President Zelensky announced on the 10th, and here's the article from the Kyiv Independent. The president highlighted Ukraine's progress in missile and drone development, noting that the Palancia, a lightweight missile drone hybrid, has entered mass production, while the Pelko hybrid has already been successfully deployed in combat. While Ukraine continues to develop indigenous missile capabilities, Western partners have only recently approved the use of foreign-made missiles for strikes on Russia's Kursk Oblast. But even if they were cut off now, when they have these missiles, even if they're cut off from like American weapons, or like Trump administration just turns their back, all they need is money and they can grow their own. And that's what's important here. Okay, more than that, they're getting money. The U.S. Treasury dispersed $20 billion backed by frozen sovereign Russian assets to a World Bank intermediary fund for economic and financial aid to Ukraine. So that's going to be paid by a loan based on sanctioned Russian assets. And there's going to be more than that coming down the pike. And then I saw this and I thought, really? That's what they're doing? Racists attacked the IAEA service, that's the International Atomic Energy Agency vehicle, with drones as it was heading for rotation at the occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. But don't worry, the IAEA expressed concern and contempt. We're very concerned about this sort of thing. Yeah, okay. They're lucky it was armored. Really, look at that thing. Okay, Tbilisi, Georgia tonight. This is last night's picture. And then if you look at tonight, it looks like the same kind of thing. It's still going on in Georgia. So the Georgian president says December 10th is Human Rights Day worldwide. But in Georgia, it marks a day when rights are trampled. This will go down in history. Those who took part or will take part will be remembered. No hiding behind masks. The Georgian people will never forget. Now, the founder and chair of the pro-Kremlin Georgian Dream Party has grown rich by 1.13 billion US dollars, according to Bloomberg. Ivanishvili's assets have now reached a record $7.73 billion, and he's ranked 391st in Bloomberg's rankings of the world's richest people. Forbes estimated that he was in 624th place, but nonetheless, he's pretty rich. He's the richest man in Georgia. His wealth was estimated at $7.6 billion in 2024, a figure that in total is equivalent to 24.8% of Georgia's GDP in 2023. That's phenomenally rich. Unfortunately, he's also working for the Russians. And his wealth isn't going to really help him be admired by the people. Protesters in Tbilisi burned a coffin with a photo of him in effigy. So, yeah, that's what's going on there. So, we've had a number of color revolutions, and Putin is particularly terrified of color revolutions, but I think we're going to need a new color for Syria and perhaps even for Georgia. Now, Crayola gives us a lot of colors to choose from, so let's go with something snazzy like pink flamingo or purple pizzazz, hot magenta, shocking pink, rose, razzle dazzle, maybe even cotton candy. Okay, last story. Romanian elections spark Bulgarian MPs to investigate Russian influence. Wait, Bulgaria? Yeah, because of what happened in Romania, the Bulgarians are looking at this too. Bulgarian lawmakers want a parliamentary commission to investigate Russian influence. The news comes following the discovery of a link between a cluster of companies in Bulgaria and a network of Russian influence identified in Romania during the annulled presidential elections. The Bulgarian investigative group, BG Elves, which sought to expose vote-buying networks in the October elections in Bulgaria, has reported the discovery of a network of Bulgarian companies owned by a Georgian national linked to the spread of pro-Russian influence in Romania. From this Romanian report, we traced 51 companies registered under the name of a Georgian citizen. Many were set up on the same day, most in 2024. We have official emails, Facebook profiles, phone numbers, and addresses of many employees at these firms. But there are truly hundreds of them, and they are all Russian. Okay, how about that? So Russia's shenanigans are being exposed in multiple countries simultaneously. Okay, I have one more thing, but before I get to that, let me remind you I'm on Spotify now, and if you can go out to Spotify and listen to an episode out there, if that's a preferred way of doing this, or you can repost this so that that spreads, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you to the 73 of you that put a rating out on Spotify. That really, really helps this message spread. Okay, last thing, Darth Putin can't be anyone else in history who says he's at war with an organization in one country while also asking the same organization for help to safely retreat from another. I remain Master Strategist. All right, my friends, that's all that I have for you today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.